What if I told you that a young shepherd once faced a terrifying warrior, a giant who struck fear into the hearts of an entire army? And what if I told you that this shepherd, armed with nothing but a sling and a few stones, did the unthinkable, defeating the giant in a single, incredible moment? Today, we're diving into the legendary tale of David and Goliath, a story of unshakable faith, raw courage, and how one boy's act of bravery changed the fate of an entire nation. Whether you've heard this story before or are hearing it for the first time, get ready to explore every detail, every emotion, and every lesson that still resonates today. Let's set the stage. The land of Israel was no stranger to war, and during this time, the Israelites were facing one of their most fearsome enemies, the Philistines. The two armies had gathered at the Valley of Elah, a place destined to become the backdrop of a battle that would be remembered for ages. Imagine the sight of thousands of soldiers lined up on two opposing hillsides, each army eyeing the other, waiting for someone to make the first move. The air is thick with tension and uncertainty. Between them stretches a valley, calm and still, as if it's holding its breath in anticipation of what's to come. Out of the ranks of the Philistines steps a man unlike any other, a giant named Goliath. He towers over everyone, standing at nearly 9 feet tall. His presence alone is enough to send shivers down the spine of any man. Goliath is not just big, he's a warrior of unmatched skill and brutality, a veteran of countless battles, and the ultimate symbol of the Philistine army's might. He's a giant in every sense of the word, covered in bronze armor that makes him nearly invincible. Picture it. A helmet of bronze sits atop his head, a heavy coat of scale armor drapes over his body, and his legs are protected by bronze greaves. He carries a javelin slung on his back, and his spear. Oh, the spear! It's like a weaver's beam, and its iron tip weighs about 15 pounds. Even his shield-bearer struggles to carry the shield that's meant to protect him. Every day, for 40 days, Goliath marches down into the valley, his footsteps echoing across the battlefield. And every day, he issues the same challenge to the Israelites. Choose a man to come and fight me. If he can kill me, we Philistines will become your subjects. But if I kill him, you will become ours. He mocks them, insults them, and more than that, he ridicules their God. Imagine the sound of his voice, booming across the valley like thunder, his words filled with contempt and arrogance. Goliath's confidence is unshakable, and his words strike fear into the hearts of every Israelite soldier. Day after day, his taunts grow louder, and the courage of the Israelite army grows weaker. No one dares to step forward. Even King Saul, the tallest and most formidable of the Israelites, is too terrified to answer Goliath's challenge. The soldiers whisper among themselves, fear evident in their eyes. How could any man possibly defeat this giant? Goliath stands as a living, breathing mountain of a man, a force of nature that cannot be tamed. To the Israelites, he is an obstacle too great to overcome, and their morale sinks lower with each passing day. But then, one day, a young shepherd named David arrives at the Israelite camp. David is the youngest of 8 brothers, a boy who spends his days tending sheep and playing his harp. He's no soldier, just a messenger sent by his father, Jesse, to bring food to his brothers who are serving in Saul's army. David's life is simple, filled with long days in the fields, watching over sheep, and long nights staring at the stars, praying and singing songs of worship. But this simplicity belies a fierce spirit within him, a spirit that's about to be awakened. As David reaches the camp, he hears Goliath's familiar taunts echoing across the valley. But unlike the soldiers around him, David doesn't cower. Instead, he's filled with a righteous anger, a feeling that someone needs to stand up to this giant, not for the sake of pride, but for the honor of God. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? David demands to know. To him, it's not about Goliath's size or strength. It's about the defiance of God's people and the challenge to God himself. David's brothers, however, are not impressed. They accuse him of arrogance, telling him to go back to the sheep where he belongs. But David isn't discouraged. He knows something must be done. He keeps asking around, trying to understand why no one is willing to stand up to Goliath. "Don't lose heart on account of this Philistine," David insists. "Your servant will go and fight him." David's words ignite murmurs of disbelief and astonishment throughout the camp. How could a young shepherd, without armor or experience, even consider facing the giant that all the seasoned warriors feared? But David's faith is unshakable. He sees the battle not as a physical contest, but as a spiritual stand for God's honor. As he speaks, there's a newfound determination in his eyes, a fire that has not been seen in the Israelite camp since Goliath first issued his challenge. Soldiers begin to gather around, listening to David's bold claims, and word of his bravery spreads quickly. Eventually, David's boldness catches the attention of King Saul himself, who, out of desperation and curiosity, calls for the young shepherd to be brought before him. Little do they know, this boy is about to change the course of their entire battle and the fate of their nation. Word of David's boldness soon reaches King Saul, and the king summons him to his tent. Saul sees a young, eager boy standing before him, a boy with no armor, no battle experience, and no training. How could this child think he could face a giant? "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him," Saul says, doubt heavy in his voice. "You are only a boy, and he has been a fighting man from his youth." But David stands firm. He's not boasting or seeking glory. He's speaking from experience and faith. "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep," David begins. "When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul sees something in David that he has not seen in any of his soldiers, a fierce, unshakable faith. It's as if David sees something the others don't, a power that goes beyond physical strength and size. Though it seems impossible, Saul agrees to let David face Goliath. But before sending him into battle, Saul insists on dressing David in his own armor, a helmet of bronze, a coat of mail, and a sword. For a moment, David must have looked the part of a warrior, but as soon as he tried to walk, it was clear that the armor didn't fit. It was too heavy, too cumbersome, and unfamiliar to him. David knew that he could not face Goliath with tools that he had never used before. "I cannot go in these," he says to Saul. "I am not used to them." And so, David takes off the armor, leaving behind the helmet, the sword, and the mail coat. Instead, David chooses the tools he knows best. He takes his shepherd's staff in one hand, and with the other, he picks 5 smooth stones from a nearby stream, placing them in his pouch. In his hand is his sling, a simple weapon, but one that David has used countless times to protect his sheep from wild animals. With these in hand, David begins his walk down into the valley, ready to face the giant who has terrified an entire army. Now, imagine the scene unfolding. On one side of the valley stands the Philistine army, cheering and jeering as they see a mere boy approaching to fight their champion. On the other side are the Israelites, watching in stunned silence, some holding their breath, others looking away in fear, unable to witness what they believe will be the slaughter of a young boy. And in the center of it all stands Goliath, staring down at David with disgust. "Am I a dog, that you come at me with sticks?" Goliath shouts, his voice filled with rage and contempt. He curses David, swearing by his gods that he will kill him and feed his flesh to the birds of the air and the wild animals. But David is not moved by Goliath's words. Instead, he responds with unwavering conviction. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin," David declares, his voice cutting through the taunts and jeers. "But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." With that, David runs quickly toward Goliath, reaching into his pouch for a stone. He places the stone in his sling, and with a skilled, practiced motion, he begins to swing it around his head, faster and faster. The moment is tense, and every eye is fixed on the young boy running toward a giant. And then, with a sudden motion, David releases the stone. It flies through the air like a bullet, guided by David's skill and, perhaps, something greater. The stone strikes Goliath square in the forehead, sinking deep into his skull. The giant's eyes go wide in shock, and before he can even utter a sound, he collapses to the ground, face first, dead. The mighty warrior, the terror of the Israelites, has been defeated by a single stone. In that single, breathtaking moment, everything changes. The silence is deafening as the reality of what just happened begins to sink in. The Philistine army stands frozen in shock, their champion slain by a boy with no armor, no sword, and no fear. And then David rushes forward. He stands over Goliath's massive body, grabs the giant's own sword, and uses it to cut off Goliath's head, a final, undeniable act of victory. The Israelite army, seeing their enemy defeated, erupts in a triumphant cheer, their fear turning into a surge of courage and faith. The Philistines, realizing that their greatest warrior is dead, turn and flee in panic. The Israelites chase after them, securing a decisive victory. On that day, the Valley of Elah becomes a place of triumph, a place where faith overcame fear, and a boy became a hero. David's victory over Goliath becomes the turning point in the war, a story that spreads throughout Israel and beyond. The boy who faced the giant would go on to become a great warrior, and eventually a king known as a man after God's own heart. The story of David and Goliath reminds us that no obstacle is too great to overcome. It teaches that real strength comes not from size or skill, but from faith, courage, and belief in a greater purpose. David's victory shows us that even when facing our giants, our fears, challenges, or doubts, what matters most is our willingness to step forward and act with courage. Have you faced a giant in your life? Share your story in the comments below, and let's find strength together. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of faith and bravery. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.